Hello, YouTubers. My name is Anthony Wall. I'm an expert on the nature of communications. Now, intelligent people, great people, have simultaneously been dependent in defenses of their fact treatment nature, quality aspects, and nature with subject treatments since before founding of America and before the founding of modern countries A through Z. A breaching method recognized and exploited a phenomenon that no one realized it could or how it could do that. Like, for example, that and how only locations, areas, and states' voices could operate the phenomenon of the names of countries. Directed by nature itself for us to name them in appreciation of its identity and relationship to itself. Like, for example, and the value of that, where there's the extent of what we can discern. As, for example, that which has us with two eyes, while there are totally different fish have two eyes. All exceptions, exception nature, come with demonstration /s of the same thing. /s. And that thing is itself generating all differences. So we can discern that which is hyper, the same exact identity of value progression. Even anything we could make up, like art, its volume science is non-distinct to all parts of itself, but also distinctly the order, the finite details, the grouped, the active, and the simultaneous, which comes with there's that distinct identity of simultaneous nature. It is shown to us because we have qualities, aspects in nature distinct from the other species bodies of individual bodies, with all group differences. Also non-distinctly. We have that non-distinct, all this different species bodies are individual species bodies of individual bodies with all group differences. Again, being generated by that which is functional. It's showing us not just this way. It is functional where and how it is a distinct identity of hyper-invisible but still discernible. This is what is the body of the sciences share, the identity they share, and where and how the sciences appear not to share an identity. It comes with demonstrations of how we can observe it. Science showing us to describe how it is its identity relationship to itself, and the value of that as a system too that appreciates a special difference here as Earth's. And with relativity, relativities to things like the sun. The same things like how and why we're demonstrated that we are right about where it's about to be too cold, where it's about to be too warm. Too hot. You know what I mean? Again, we are shown that we're distinct from the other species bodies, but we are also non-distinct from them. And we are simultaneous with them, but also for a further distinct identity of simultaneous nature as the value/value progression that is now our species body, humanity. It is not the other species bodies, but it is all things anyway. And so many pray, but not now, hyper additionally, because there is and has been a hyper archetypal criminal enterprise method that is not countries A through Z, except for how other things, others, or selves are blamed for things that it caused and that it maintains. So the opposite true is truth simultaneously. No. Because hyper simultaneously too. Nature demonstrates that to us a number of ways at the same time. One of those in that is Leith of Hades, or what more probably the definition of Leith of Hades had been by the ancients as forced space nature transfer, and nature being a word for identity needed to be used. The same reason we need more than one word for a verb. Nature being, because, like, for example, if there were two cells of your body and they could see each other, in other words, and have to describe your complete identity, which is not their own. Like a cell is on the tip of the hair of your head. They're not your body. I mean, they are not your complete identity, but they are anyway. That's because of where and how and why you and all things are its identity, volume science. In other words. So we know this, but we're not paying attention to its system that's just hypernated pure. Also, because we have our founders' communications to us replaced. Inside the nature of debate, our self-value, criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw, definitions of freedom of speech, and of subject treatments. For example, too, in other words, there is mass stacking offensively. A breaching method showed. For one of the things that forgiveness is important for is because where nature shows us things, like roles with the breaching method, that black pupils, whites of eyes, replacing what nature communicates with that, and replacing what our founders declassified to have communicated for themselves about that. There are self-valued roles with that. There are proofs because of, like, people had roles with before other natures of like roles needing to hide lipoaggressions for peaceful energy generation. See, but nothing is peaceful because before America's founders were born, and before European founders were born, African, Asian, already a hyper-foreign had forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded. The system before the sciences became criminally foreign influenced. People with the identity, the grounds, locations of the principles and defenses of that. The straight hyper nature of communications of nature itself, straight up, not leaving out the smallest finite detail. Not leaving out the difference between criminal and seditious natures of positive or negatives, like criminal and seditious natures of peace. People are using their knowledge of good and evil with readings of histories. Now, what is recorded is that people from other countries involved with the subjects of Judge Napolitano, with Judging Freedom's YouTube channel. These are also people involved with Fox Connecticut News, Facebook, and the Facebook pages of Fox News, of CNN, of MSNBC. Collusion/S with former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, in a bunch of countries. Overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists. I don't know his name, if it's really Larry Martin, and people tied to him that know my name. They're involved all along roads and routes and conjunctions to them. As time collusion/S with people who put predicate acts with facts into databases affected. They're just typing fake transcripts, fake ties, fake natures of ties to people from off campuses, though. And then on off them, where and how sense and sensibilities of people, use Jane Austen's phrase, before I even read her book. But because before I even read her book, I know the proper answer of American history, proper principle treatments with American history. You don't leave out where and how, value changed. What our founders communicated about the witch trials place and about Webb House, now renamed the Webb Stevens Museum, with more motivations, nature's narratives. Why that? Sense and Sensibilities know why they changed the name of it and why they're explaining it tactile from how our founders communicated to have it declassified, to have that in themselves communicated for. James Madison's plan was all involved with that. The Witch Child's Place is right next to Webb Stevens Webb House. Now again, they renamed the Webb Stevens Museum. They had to counter extort and leave slavery entrenched, northern colonies, southern colonies. That is not clear because of the method they have with Sense and Sensibilities used to sense for the breaching method through our own regarding the guilt and the non-integrity of the list, like the three branches of government, the intelligence tied to them, the overt criminal enterprises, private criminal enterprises, and terrorists, and countries individually grouped and together that had roles with internationally entrenched torture, extortion, in fact, human nature slavery, therefore physical slavery, and much worse system to maintain the sense and sensibilities of people. Also, those laws and the torture method forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded people to pretend they had free speech to an extent, even though they didn't. Otherwise, to be sensed, including if there were a majority of people to be sensed and not adapted to, including if it was everybody. This is one of the reasons that A through Z. This is still effective. This is one of the reasons that A through Z, countries A through Z, no one has addressed how we have black pupils, whites, and eyes, and how a breaching method reassigned that. And then America's founders were born. No one has addressed how we know it's already declassified. They did not have free speech. No one has addressed how people get away with pretending other. How theater, too. Time, the culture, American culture. There's collusions to keep other as roles with this breach method effectively at countries A through Z. Kept and needs to keep other things, others ourselves, blamed for things it blamed. People want to use their knowledge of good and evil about American history, about Russian history, about the history with wars, right through those wars. All sides had collusion with psychiatry, originally and still with criminally foreign influence, tactically delusions raw. Only concentrated there, though. And this is right where and how the difference of guilt is used by this breaching method, exploiting the hyperdifference. Know how we have the same color eyes and different color eyes at the same time, per that which is projecting to us. It is not us. It is not the other species' bodies, but it is all things anyway. It is also projecting to us, as the breaching method knew it would. A human fact, human nature breaching method is one of the things that we could simultaneously discern readings of and appreciations of the law and of its collusion /S with the use of location /S by the breaching method. Forgiveness is because this is what we are discerning when we want, if we study, nature shows us how and why. People could even be motivated to pretend not to discern. Someone capable of using the fact that they have black people's whites of eyes alone to discredit the integrity of all sides of criminal and civil cases, their lawyers, their sources, all the different natures of conjunctions to them per manifest, per use of location /S. In other words, so on Facebook itself, the leadership and the FBI, multiple directors of the FBI since before James Comey involved also with co-defendants of former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, involved also with digital crimes and wire crimes with Wethersfield. With Wethersfield judicial branch officers and natures of conjunctions to it, and to that, and the difference of that exploited, where and how things are, people go back and forth with perception and questions too. These are being used where and how they are everyone's sense and sensibility, sensing for the breaching method, collusion / S with the identity theft, fraud, slander method that we all had the ability to discern since we were kids. Some ways, more and more, that's being taken away consciously through the collusions that countries A through Z with their own differences with others, where and how they had the audacity to be, it's because they were abused through the differences of campuses A through Z also having been exploited. In other words, the audacity to pretend that anyone spoke for honesty or integrity. The suburbs were designed for factual nature, torture, extortion, and slavery. People pretend passions and emotions and believe them. So, regarding anyone who brings that up, the only reason they get away with that, even though it's recorded, is because it's relative to them putting predicate acts with facts into databases and sensing any sense and sensibilities that are going to use correlation proper regarding the guilt of the witch trials, therefore the three branches of government. And because what was, even if they were completely made up, the witch trials, they're right next to the founding location, right where George Washington had to come to counter-extort right before the last battle of the Revolutionary War. And George Washington, using James Madison's plan before he was a president. And the president / chief, James Madison, then when he was a president too, he still didn't have free speech. They declassified this to us, clearer than day. What makes it not clear are self-binding rules with quality aspects in the nature of the debate itself, as maintained, entertained, psychopaths. So I don't know. There's a Joshua Schumacher and his mother. I don't know his mother's name. They try to take pictures and make people see me near them to make it look like I know them. They have rules also with the Scalora family, with Wethersfield Police Facebook page, and with police forging and switching names with child sexual offenders and medical offenders, roles with identity theft, fraud, slanders, roles of Wethersfield Police who attach me to fake conversations with themselves as a kid and now as an adult. Their sources, including the FBI Director Robert Luskin, and his co-defendants and their family members and neighbors, Joe DeMoro and others, recorded capacity demonstrate confirmed wire crimes and falsified police reports rules with the people further involved with the Phil Cololo, and as the Phil Cololo further involved with some sexual and medical offenders of kids, and rolls with it with nonverbal confirmations. In other words, put me fake ties, fake nature ties, fake locations near him too, with probate court judges, family members involved with them too, with time abuses at child campuses and elderly homes at the same time. There are proofs next to the veterans locations too, interstates. These are people inter-campuses and intra-campuses, rules of predicate acts with facts methods. The intelligence community recorded capacity demonstrated confirmed. I don't know if it's a Larry Martin. Real quick, there was one exception of me seeing him. He has roles all along Route 3 and its conjunctions to that, like the state judicial branch officers, with people intercities involved with the Saudi attackers, where they were used remotely in America's side, and all sides were by a breaching method. And you guys also have passions and emotions regarding people when they make short words regarding, not even regarding things like that appear to be debatable, but regarding the predicate acts of facts. Connecticut's Channel 3 News attached me to fake conversations with themselves and with others. They have lawyers, too, with their ad placements with them involved, too. Because with all kinds of legal scams, originally still. That's what witch trials are about. You ask yourself, what else was entrenched? There were crazy laws against Native Americans, against colonists, sickly distinctly, but sickly non-distinctly too. But rather than everyone countering that to an extent, it was against everyone equally. Everyone colluded with it, are still colluding with it, and it's reassignment of differences. Again, we have the same colorized and different colorized at the same time. So we have the means of nature showing us the hyper-evidential. That hyper-evidential. It's teaching us about difference, teaching us about similarity, showing us we are a human species body of individual bodies with all group differences. And so it controls our subject treatment, but we are forced to ignore that. Well, that's because my title is associated with keeping the nuclear warm. Increasingly, people tied to Heather Hansen and her educators have roles of identity theft, fraud, slanders with her, and with her boyfriends, plural. She'll tell you this, and they also abused her. There are men and women that abused her, and it's not legitimately too. With the one and a principal upskirt nature. He's Michael Bean. He switched his name with the name, and then he said, "Oh," and he corrected it, like he was trying to tell me Mike Levine. And he kept calling me back with more. And I never got to tell him what I caught them doing, recorded. And they've been replacing it before the principal upskirt nature was arrested and put in jail. And they're torturing him to say nothing because the jail he's in is also collusion with them. Increasingly, with people with the state judicial branch offices of Connecticut are also people with the state corrections offices. As names of Connecticut also involved interstates. Increasingly, people with Washington, D.C., and with predicate acts with facts into databases. As people who had conversations recorded, had conversations with 2 speech class teachers I had in Wethersfield, Connecticut, and pretending passions and emotions about the substance of that. As their roles increasingly with people involved with untimely deaths before and after that have connected roles of that, and murders and body dumping spots and names next to it, increasingly tied to people from my grammar school who I never had conversations with at all. Others will tell you that they were influenced to make fake exception of knowing me time, like a South Civiello. I only know him. I went one time to go to a Cub Scout meeting, and like no one even it was him and his neighbor, and people across the street from his house in his area, increasingly involved with body dumping spots. I didn't know that yet. No, so I was polite, and that was it. We left. We didn't even talk. In other words, it was. And then the other kid, Richard Dabrowski, I never saw him. I never saw them around campuses either. Just one time in my 4th grade class, 1985, a South Seville was in my class. Never saw him around anywhere. Only that I remember. We never had communications with him. In other words, never had verbal communications with him. I only remember just his name because one time he was brought up to me. I looked over and they were talking about he was holding a Care Bear. It was like Care Bears were popular at the time. But this is also the year before that, which is 1984. They had also people with New Britain, Connecticut, Central Connecticut State University has foreign and domestic military originally instilled. Collusion/S, for example, with the 3 branches of government, and names I found out also and we could all observe on up the state corrections offices and judicial branch offices in conjunctions to it. And Eric Oliveri, sought me out. I never saw him out in my life. He sought me out to confess, demonstrate with court confirmed he'd been planting evidences with a whole bunch of people next to the state judicial branch offices, lying to those people about me and about himself with the state judicial branch offices. And with people at Trinity College involved with my neighbors, a whole bunch of direct and indirect ways that were passed that were forced to collusion with and to ignore the interbranch individually grouped in together, forced them to collusions intercities on off the campuses I went to, intercities. Even when I was not going, I was living next to Central Connecticut State University. And so the people were making confessions to me intercities. And how and why that was is manifest. Is right where is relative to where and to how before religious messengers were born. A breaching method was already using confessions. It had already forced, tricked, hurt, and persuaded names A through Z to blame other things, others, or selves for things that it did, and then to defend their roles doing that, and to have counters to that, rightfully counter that, but wrongfully defending it syntactically, also blaming other things, others, or selves, rather than the breaching method that was causing that and maintaining use / as of it finite, grouped, and together. So note how they have, quote, criminal enterprises, unquote, grouped distinctly from terrorists. And originally and still, however, everyone having been the victim to the breaching method that had the differences between overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists, already being and having been used by itself at all locations, areas, and states. We're an extent of collusion syntactically, therefore physically, of everyone formally against themselves and against everyone around them, was his force for safety reasons, etc. Otherwise, that body was sensed, adapting to it, even fractionally properly. And that was adapted to, including if that body was the majority of people, including if it was everybody. So Wethersfield police attached me to fake conversations with them as a kid, and now as an adult. And they're implying it has to do with their roles with the nuclear and with the people with their roles with fire departments and with medical campuses, fire campuses and medical campuses. Not just the ones where they go out to do what we need to care about them and help them do the best and safely. There are proofs that it might have been murder or murder related, even if it was made up. There are news reports of a Hartford officer who died of asphyxiation, where they had his oxygen tank mixed wrong. And there are people with the name Della Fera who have been acting off behind my back at campuses and off campuses with foreign and domestic people involved with all these different countries, including Russians and Ukraine at the same time, forced to collusions with our own and other countries at Hartford Hospital. It's not just the Leahy family and the Lombardo family involved putting fake transcripts. And there was a kid they had laying down that works with involved with the Parks and Recreation, involved with people with some wire crimes on my street, and the differences of guilt. See, they bring up everyone's using each other's names to screen their roles with all kinds of bad things, but they never had legitimate roles to be with that. And they're confessing too, because they want to debate things as fake punks. They're switching and forging names. They want to pretend they have psychopath takes on peace, calmness, order, and of aggression. And they have collusions, including with the prisons, tied to their collusions with organized crime acts and methods, with the names at and conjunctive to the judicial and corrections offices, as the ones involved with predicate acts on my street from other areas. with the ones involved with wire crimes of the Wethersfield Police and other police departments as their collusion/S with the ones. These are Sandy Hook campuses too, involved with a whole bunch of different countries with psychiatry, involved with their patients and criminals before they were caught, with the crime scenes, including body dumping spots and the names next to them, and roles collusions with the crime scenes, forcing them to happen before they happen, and forcing the people involved to keep their mouth shut about what really went down. What really was is recorded. The principal obscure nature also has rules of all kinds of between campuses, predicate acts with facts methods, identity theft, fraud, slanders methods, the differences of it, and with Facebook page, the Facebook has a Joshua Julian involved with a whole bunch of people tied to him, involved with some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino themed. Mark Violet confessed him and a Wethersfield Pizza and a Maria Fazzino, and people tied to a Stephen Stocco. A Stephen Stocco also has wire crimes with Wethersfield Police, and that are refusing to identify themselves, switching and forging names, making confessions about their roles, switching officers' names on falsified police reports, narratives, and make confessions, and then just putting God knows what, because they just put a charge with no writing and just make confessions. That's manifest to the breaching method, measures and maintains people, styles, needs, and natures, and families. Specifically have people value the value of adult or kid, tactical ulterior from how nature needs us to, relative to the criminal insidiousness nature / hyper criminal insidiousness nature. That was his northern colonies and southern colonies, sickly distinctly entrenched, but also sickly non-distinctly. And see, we have not had either of those reasons addressed honestly. And this is inseparable from, so Trinity College and Central Connecticut State University has a Joshua Julian, has a Joshua Stryker involved with digital crimes, with people from Russia and Ukraine, also with the intelligence community at Hartford Hospital and next to them, which is a campus node, also with the businesses and houses next to them through time. Also, like with an Eric Jensen, also involved with a Joshua Julian and state police and whiting forensics people through time. Involved also with a Phil Cololo, with a principal upskirt nature and more sexual and medical offenders of kids, and with police that attach them to fake conversations with themselves as kids and then as adults too. Like a Mendez police forms family, attached me to fake conversations with the older Mendez police brother. I never had a word of conversation with my life. I only know him I remember his name used, and he walked by smiling a couple of times. And I don't even know who told me about his name. And I verified things about it. In other words, he's involved with his older brother. He's involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, attached me to fake conversation with him at the Wethersfield police station as one of the ones who has time collusion/S with the World Trade Center attackers and the names at the World Trade Center and next to it in the World Trade Center attack, including a court next to it, where the court itself has rules with a sequence shift and names on all sides of that case and their sources, brought up with confessions and threats to me on off Central Connecticut State University, New Britain, Connecticut, since I was a kid, involved with identity theft, fraud, slanders, and putting fake things in databases at and next to the campuses I went to, intercities, and in my town, every campus I went to, and names next to it recorded having been pulled into identity theft, fraud, slanders against me. They'll tell you have to ask them properly, otherwise they'll repeat fake things, vaccines. So I don't even know all the people tied to the Larry Martin, if that's really his name. I never had a class with him. One time he walked by me when I was getting up from my class. His name wasn't even in my class. He was, or when I was going into my class. I guess he was in the class before it, or maybe just temporary that day. But these are people interbranch that are switching names tied to these names. They're covering up what they did on Elm Street in Rocky Hill and Wethersfield. with people since I was a kid, intercities. They've been planting predicate acts with facts, fake ties, fake natures of ties to me. Two speech class teachers I had, two times I took cooking class. The people they recorded, they planted in those classes had roles of predicate acts with facts on my street. And we could observe this as ones who had collusions at those other at Elm Streets, like with this what's his name, Eric Oliveri. I never had a word of conversation with his brother or Joshua Stryker. And what I said about on Facebook, it was halfway dishonest. In other words, because but it was honest too, because about no, in other words, these are people who sought me out to record, confess, demonstrate, confirm roles with the state judicial branch offices and with victims advocates. A bunch of people in the Britain Superior Court and other courts, I found out too, are involved with the Oliveri family, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, and with their roles of predicate acts with facts between campuses, putting fake things in databases, but with other people putting fake things in databases and have them pretend fake things, hyper additionally with that. So it will stay everyone pretending it's thing. In other words, I only know that Eric Oliveri is seeking me out to plant federal evidence, use truths for lies. That's what's actually recorded. And there's a Joshua Stryker and a bunch of people next to Trinity College who have roles also with a Neville family, recorded, confessed, demonstrate, confirmed, all along Route 3, and conjunctions to it, conjunctions to that, like the state judicial branch offices, are people involved with the World Trade Center attack, overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and terrorists, and with the judicial and corrections offices the same way as the same ones. And these are people I don't know at all that sought me out, like a Joshua Julian. He sought me out on Facebook. People started making all these confessions and demonstrations, confirmations about recorded known. You know, they have roles of all kinds of natures of body dumping spots and things and untimely deaths they brought up at the same time. They have roles of untimely death at Trinity College, even if it was made up. They have roles of ones with and with that too, with the different ones at the same time. With Robert Rodriguez, who brought up the principal upskirt natures campus to me. And I recorded them with all kinds of criminally foreign influence readings of statutes and roles with cover-ups of it. They are shown to need by putting fake things in databases, by using all truths for lies, and just mixed with that. It's also relative to where and to how. They have some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, Italian theme, Korean theme, Ukrainian theme, Russian themed at the same time with the Wethersfield police switching and forging names, refusing to identify themselves legitimately. All kinds of predicate acts with people and names that planted evidence on all sides of my house from other areas, with the ones involved with the wire crime acts and confessions of the police, other ways at the same time. They're involved with communications, racketeering, worse than war crimes. And these are people with all sides of the criminal and civil cases, interstates, and in the court. And the courts at the same time, the police forms involved. And next to the World Trade Center, right before it, they're keeping, saying whatever for all kinds of reasons, but also for the breaching method. You guys are pretending things are debatable about history. The principle to a history is James Madison's plan and the founders behind him that forced George Washington himself. We were supposed to be honest about the extortion of George Washington and the counter-extortion of him. He had to use James Madison's plan to help and counter-extort and force them to an extent, help the Constitution get unabridged. They can only do it to an extent where they would have been sentenced. Vaccines. So in other words, the whole wire crime acts and mail crime acts and methods that the Justice Department has and has had through wars, and this is hyper evidential, just as having black people's rights of eyes, and simultaneously what nature and what our founders communicated with this replaced. Not one has trace, correctly pure vaccines. I teach those things. So please, Judge Napolitano, get them on paper, one name in sequence. Since I was a kid, Wethersfield Police had roles with the FBI and other police departments with all kinds of stacking predicate acts with facts into databases, interbranch, intercities, and intercampuses too, but not just campuses. With a whole bunch of other countries overt criminal enterprise bribe ones at the same time, terrorists. 2, more World Trade Center predicate acts. That's with the substance of WFSB's fake conversations with me, with themselves, and with others, and they changed communications with me, with themselves, and with others too. They sequence shift. In other words, and they forced a principal child abuser with more sexual and medical offenders as ones personally and professionally, foreign and domestic, a whole bunch of people at the same time tied to the courts and the judicial branch offices and corrections offices. In other words, you have these prisons too, a whole bunch of people with the name O'Brien involved with the Sandy Hook prisons, with sexual and medical offenders of kids, with intercampuses, with the campuses, intelligence next to them. A lot of types of experts real quick to jump into people's conversations they don't even know dishonestly. Get the Wethersfield Police and the retired police chiefs onto paper, please. Not just the involved too with the judges in courts, involved with some black KKK, Confederate flag theme, Latino theme, Italian theme. There's an Eric Mendez also with the New Britain Superior Court, with his older brother, with the falsified police reports roles too, and with a Phil Collo, further with a Bob Chase, with a whole bunch of other people with whiting forensics since I was a kid. They have recorded collusions with people involved with wire crimes and people tied to them, but there's inter and intra-cities. In other words, with the same house, further involved with the principal upskirt nature and untimely deaths, inter-cities and intra-cities that were, for example, murders were brought up at the same time, confirmations on Facebook, and then they took my Facebook pages. No one, everyone's up there, this, act like it's real life. There are all kinds of evidences, racketeering, role cover-ups. They're showing they need to hide it, things from the past, active and to come. And they're using and have used Facebook and other social media, Sense and Sensibilities, where they have types of jobs, for example, with the intelligence community. So then they start making subject treatments like violence. Oh, I went because it was violence. They're sequence shifting. They're starting the violence. Then they kick people off the platform. As collusions with all kinds of natures of organized crime, including World Trade Center attack roles and maintain breaching method roles. So we're going to address how the suburbs don't have legitimate, insane legal representation, let alone the cities. And we're going to examine where and how the Harry Beecher Stowe and Mark Twain House are together near the state capital of Connecticut. And a whole bunch of people tied to former director of the FBI, Robert Luskin, like a Chet Casper, has non-verbally recorded, confessed, demonstrated, confirmed. He has rules of identity theft, fraud, slanders against me, with his educators behind my back, people that put me to fake locations, fake ties, fake natures of ties to him and to others. He doesn't even know me. In other words, what he knows, he's spying with other countries. He has stuff to do with the people next to the state capitol, with other countries, and with FBI director, non-verbally, and his lawyer too, non-verbal confirmations to me. Roles next to Fox Connecticut News with people like a Thaddeus Grabowski, also involved people all along Hangdog Lane and Two Rod Highway, and conjunctions to it like the Berlin Turnpike and Route 3. And conjunctions to that, like state judicial branch officers, increasingly roles of predicate acts with facts methods and with motivations screening, because their motivations are greatly influenced by the breaching method that motivated you all to keep other things, others, or selves forced to blame for where and for how and for why. Even though nature shows us, people pretend they don't realize that we have black people's whites of eyes means to discern all sides of criminal and civil cases, and the branches of government and the intelligence tied to them are criminally foreign influence / hyper-criminally foreign influence and tactical delusions raw at the same time. This is inseparable from what slavery is about. Just like the breaching method as one of the things that is true always, that was the value of those laws. Regardless, they were completely made up of witch trials. They had the slavery laws entrenched. They had the breaching method, Native Americans against Native Americans, even, because they forced A through Z to entertain sciences, voice tactical terror from how nature shows us to appreciate and to speak for their shared identity unabridged. So Connecticut interbranch are refusing to identify themselves. Increasingly, people tied to this Larry Martin have roles with the Joshua Schumack and Wethersfield Police and other involved with other police departments with the same house / S involved with wire crimes with them and confessions of pretended other over the phone, where and how they have roles attached with the names involved with that too, directly and indirectly. That attached me to Faith being at the police station as a kid too and speaking with them. That wasn't at all. And when they arrested me, after, and that was the kids who did go down there and speak with them. They increasingly have collusions with a whole bunch of different countries and people at and next to Harvard Hospital involved with overt criminal enterprises, private ones, and foreign and domestic intelligence. Not the way they're pretending. They're leaking things like this. They're involved with wire and mail crime acts and methods with the fire department at the same time with the police departments and the courts, switching and forging names. That, in other words, there's some black KKK, etc. With women judges too at New Britain Superior Court involved with this. Please get them onto these Mendez police are also intercities with the Wethersfield Police Department and other police departments and roles next to Fox Connecticut News at Hartford, Connecticut, and involved with people in the hallway of the Britain Superior Court through time, increasingly involved with the same house / S about with the town offices too, and military, foreign and domestic, criminally foreign influence, tactical delusions raw, and motivation screening too. And with people I don't know at all, like this Joshua Julian. And there are people named Del Mastro. I don't know them. They were lied to. So they would lie to my family and plant illusions. I don't know that girl's name. In other words, it has something to do with I said that they should make a protest against the beating of Rodney King. There was a girl that was timed me once a year. She would time me. She's involved with former director. Okay, thank you.